Evening. Declare today's select meeting of June 30th, 2008. In order, we'll begin tonight's meeting with a allegiance to the flag and a moment of silent reflection. Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, tonight we have a continued show cause hearing, but that's not for a few minutes. Some of our new business. And first thing we have listed is Mr. Mizuko. You have several matters you wanted to begin discuss this evening.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First up for the board's consideration is a request under the Municipal Relief Act for fund transfer for the police department in the amount of $60,000 from police salary, paid holiday to a number of different accounts to balance out the police budget for the year. We do anticipate one more of these coming. This was inadvertently left off the town meeting warrant as we had handled most of our municipal relief transfers on the town meeting warrant since we were so close to the end of the fiscal year. The FinCom took this up last night and did approve it, so we request that the board approve it as well.
Who's it? I'll second it.
Mr. Right, I'm gonna bear with me a little bit tonight. I'm not sure what's wrong, but I'm having your voices. How you made the motion, Mr. Maloney seconded it?
Sure. I think Mr. Hedgehog did.
That's fine.
Anything?
Aye.
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 Anything further on the discussion? Think none, will vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We need to do a roll call, don't we? Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mr. Lang, Mrs.
Aye.
Donahue.
Aye.
All right, Mr. Hodge, thank you. So that's unanimous. Mr. Zuko, you also had another recommendation?
Yes, I have several of them here. Recommendation of the board for emergency expenditures. This is our, not a requirement by DOR, but a recommendation in the DOR when you anticipate deficit spending in the event of an emergency. We do this every year with snow and ice removal. We actually will have not deficit spent for the COVID emergency. However, any funding or any expenses that came in after we received our CARES Act funding, before we receive our next CARES Act funding, it's really just a couple-week period. We want to hold those expenses in abeyance until we receive CARES Act funding. If we didn't go through this DOR process, those become overcharges, which just comes out of our free cash. We don't want to subtract those out of our free cash calculation. Therefore, we want to be able to hold them over. To do that, we just need the board's approval on this letter, which is a standard DOR process.
Motion to approve.
Second it.
Okay, seconded. Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mr. Lang,
Aye.
Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Hodge.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so that's unanimous vote there, Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, sir.
Item,
Next up,
please. Next item on Mr. Mizuko's agenda for tonight is some discussion of the Forbes sale purchase and sales. I'd just like to start off by saying last Monday night before the annual town meeting, the board did vote unanimously to award that contract to the high bidder for $13,515. Continental Global. We have,
Add 3
Oh,
zeros.
that's million.
yeah,
what did I say?
1,000.
million.
Thank you for that correction. 13,500. On your personal sales agreement, that's you just looking for us to vote to sign that, correct?
Yes, sir. I'm asking the board's authority, the board's request to sign the purchase and sale agreement And I believe we discussed authorizing the manager signing other documents related to the closing as directed by council to ensure we can complete and move the process forward without the need to call additional meetings if something comes up.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Mr.
Any-
Chair,
Anything further on the
question, please.
motion? Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you. Would this be, Mr. Mizuko, would this be in the form of a specific power of attorney for that purpose?
No, it's just to sign on behalf of the town, anything that may be required, as advised by council. So it would only be if council says this needs to be completed and it's with their advice.
I think they'll probably ask you to sign a specific power of attorney. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Mr. Baloney?
Voting for, yes, aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
Yeah,
Aye.
I think I heard all I asked you in approval. And I
Aye.
remind everybody, we're now at home, to please try to get by the office and sign these documents so they can be sent to council and move. Still have time to put some more. Oh, yeah, excuse me, Mr. Hajar?
Yeah, now that motion's passed, just, can we go back to the emergency expenditure just for one clarification? We voted it, but I just want to say for the record that we voted it up to $200,000, correct? So we didn't say that, and it wasn't mentioned during the discussion, but I think we want to say for the record that the authorization is to allow the permission for the town to spend up to $200,000 on the emergency expenditures.
Correct. That is
Okay.
correct. Yep. Clarification.
Thank you.
Mr. Mizuko?
Yes, thank you. The fourth item that I have for the board today is a recommendation regarding cost of living adjustments for management and non-union staff. The recommendation, consistent with the contracts we have been signing with our units, is a 1% cost of living adjustment. And we would also do a base wage adjustment equivalent to a week's sick pay or week's time, and also reducing 5 sick days for management and non-union employees. We've made that arrangement with several of our unions, the direction that we're going in with our benefit submissions and our benefit changes. So we're keeping consistent and moving forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board has.
I think Mr. Hajar?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tony, I know we've done this with some of the unions. I think it's a good thing, but in the explanation, we don't basically say how many people this is or what the cost is by doing that buyback. We've done it for the unions. I just wonder if we have those numbers for.
Sure. So the total annual cost is the estimate is around the low $60,000 range for the buyback provision. I wouldn't call it a buyback provision. It applies to about 90 management and non-union employees. We've signed a similar agreement with, if I do the math, about 80 of our other non-union employees, 80 to 100. So this will bring 50% of our workforce into compliance with this, and we anticipate in the next year or two getting the other 50%.
And that's,
Consistent with the funding we have available in our Article 1 appropriation.
okay, that was my follow-up question. Thank you.
Anything else? We have a motion on this matter?
Move to approve?
Second.
And second.
There was a second.
Tom Maloney,
Yes, I'm taking a vote.
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yeah, aye.
and Mr. Hajar.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that's unanimous approval of that request as well. I apologize for what's going on here. I don't know if it's happening on your end or not, but all the voices are breaking up and I don't seem to be hearing you at times, and I don't know if you're hearing me at times. So we'll try to work through. All right. Anything else, Mr. Zuko, at this time?
No, sir. I had two other items, as the board is aware, but we decided we would hold those until the manager's update portion to let the board get through more of their agenda.
Okay. Well, we moved on to vice chair position. Last meeting, we did vote to formalize our tradition for chairman by creating the position of a vice chairman. I just put it in writing, exactly what I believe the board voted, but I did do two. As vice chair, and the second one I have here is vice chairman. Otherwise, the wording is exactly the same. So I'm just looking for, if there aren't any other direction on which term to use.
Yeah, Bill, you broke up at the beginning. I couldn't hear most of what you said. We have your submitted write-up, which I think covers it exactly as we discussed a couple weeks ago. So I commend you for being able to write it that way. To me, it says exactly what we approved and want to do going forward. So I'm in favor of the vice chair title, and that's fine with me.
Okay. Any further comments?
Mr. Chairman, I think that your summary was accurate in what we spoke of, so I agree with Mr. Hajar.
So that's a vote, a motion and a second to approve that document that memorializes our vote to create the position of vice chair. And that will be the immediate past chairman will serve in that capacity. Okay, so I think we don't need a vote. We can move on that.
So
One
can we
moment.
congratulate Mr. Maloney then?
I'm sorry.
Can we congratulate Mr. Maloney?
Why don't we have a vote, Mr. Chair?
We voted 2 weeks ago.
Yes. He's the first vice chairman.
We didn't vote 2 weeks ago to.
All right,
approve the written.
all in favor, Mr. Maloney?
Aye, you betcha.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Donahue?
Aye.
Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. That's unanimous. I'm going to take a moment and move over to another computer and see if somehow that resolves this. Give me one moment, please.
This one.
See, Mrs. Donahue, aren't you glad you're not the only one with computer problems?
Mr. Plasko looks a lot better now, Mr. Hajar.
All right, everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Better.
So thank you for your indulgence. I think the hour has arrived for our continued show cause hearing. The show cause hearing has to do with Hibachi Steak House, Inc., doing business as Hibachi Steakhouse. This business has ceased operating as of at least July of 2019. We had a hearing in April. We continued that hearing, and now we're here after this almost year's time to decide what the next course of action is. I believe we are joined by attorney for the Hibachi Steakhouse.
We are, Mr. Chairman, if you can hear me.
Can't hear anything.
All right, it's low, we'll adjust it. That's gonna wait 1 second. We can hear you just a second as we adjust the sound.
Okay.
I'm wondering if that sounds good.
Lost 'em.
I mean, if
We
you-
had them and we lost them.
Very low because you don't have speakers.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
One moment, please. I'm sorry. One moment. That's it.
That might be the best way for them to hear it. Otherwise, it's just the internal speaker. I don't know why the hard wire is not working. So I'm going to set that.
I'm sorry. Would you please identify yourself for the record and position?
Yeah, she's working.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brian Almeida, and I represent Hibachi Steakhouse, Inc. And good evening to the newly minted vice chair and also the other members of the board.
Moment, please. Trying everything tonight.
Something so we can tell if the sound's working.
Yeah, could you speak to me so I can tell if I'm hearing?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can hear him, Bill. Can you hear him, David?
Yes, Bill, can you hear us?
Clear a 5-minute recess until we get this resolved.
All right, I'm gonna ask for a 5-minute recess while we get this technical problem resolved, please. 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Sorry again for the delay. We had some technical problems here. I'm on the third computer and hopefully we'll be able to continue and finish the business. So as I tried to announce earlier, we have a continued show cause hearing regarding Hibachi Steakhouse, Inc., doing business as Hibachi Steakhouse. They closed business on or about July of 2019. We had a hearing. We gave them till like March or whatever, April 7th. And we've continued that hearing again till tonight. And we need to hear from the establishment and decide the course of action. We're gonna pull this license back or issue another extension. Attorney Almeida?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and other members of the board. My name is Brian Almeida, and I represent Hibachi Steakhouse, Inc.
Give us an update on what your request might be this evening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our request will be an additional 3-month continuance. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has especially hit the restaurant industry quite hard and has made our diligent efforts in connection with our broker to find a transferee for this license particularly difficult in light of the circumstances. And, you know, in particular, noting the fact that hopefully Governor Baker's orders with respect to reopening the state will in 3 months' time be at the state where restaurants are in the position to fully reopen and take advantage of this license and therefore be interested in purchasing it. And with the understanding that a 3-month extension would, in essence, cover the months of April, May, and June that the transferor has sort of lost to the pandemic, that is our request tonight, or any shorter extension that the board deems just in light of the circumstances.
I would just say that I'm a little concerned about giving a further extension because the COVID problem has certainly hit your industry terribly hard and would make it difficult to sell. But you had plenty of time prior to that hitting this to have made any sales or any arrangements, and we had no indication that anything was happening and that they had any success at all in selling the license.
So in response to that, I would just say that, we have been working with a broker. There have been diligent efforts made to find a transferee for the license. And at the last opportunity to get an extension, there was the intention and action carried out in terms of getting a transferee successfully, and there were diligent efforts made and continuing to be made, but unfortunately those were sort of all for naught given the pandemic. And hopefully, with any luck, within the next 3 months, as things continue to reopen, there will be a better opportunity. So I would suggest that we were sort of denied the benefit of the last extension given the pandemic, and given the opportunity to avail ourselves of the same 3 months that we were sort of denied by the pandemic, we would have the opportunity to find a transferee.
Right. Anything from the board members, Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, originally I thought since this restaurant has been closed since last July, I thought that I would say no further extension. But it seems that our world has taken on a very difficult trend lately. And in addition to this COVID crisis, now we have this weather crisis. And it's a business that's located in Norwood, and it's people who lost jobs. We need to keep jobs. So even though I usually would not go along with such a long extension, I would like to make a motion that we just grant the 3-month extension, but make it definite that if they don't have a buyer by then it's all over. We take the license back.
Well, hold your motion until we have other comments and close the hearing, please. Mr. Hajar?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Almeida, can you tell me what efforts were made between last July, at least up until April 7th, to try to secure a buyer?
Absolutely. In the first instance is retaining a broker who has the professional capacity to seek out contacts in the restaurant industry. In addition to availing ourselves of our own contacts in the restaurant industry to find someone interested in taking on this license. And then in addition, continuing those efforts, attempting to reach out to other people who'd be interested. Unfortunately, particularly this most recent 3-month extension, the economic conditions just haven't been conducive to someone being interested in purchasing it. In fact, the restaurants are closing rather than opening, unfortunately. But the hope is that as the economy reopens, there's renewed interest in perhaps starting a new restaurant venture, and that someone would be interested either in taking on the license to start a new restaurant or to enhance their current setup.
Can you tell the board, since last July when you closed up until April 7th, how many actual parties approached you about purchasing your license?
I think it's been more about finding people to approach with respect to purchasing the license. I know that there have been several interested parties that for one reason or another haven't followed through. I believe at least one or two. But I think it's been more about reaching out to find people who are interested in the license rather than people coming to us asking about interest in the license. I think it's been, and that's part of the challenge, has been trying to sort of solicit interest in it. But there is, again, some optimism that, the restaurant industry, there will be increased demand, given that I hope that there's going to be interest in people going out again and dining at restaurants. And that's the hope, that there'll be someone who's interested in taking on that opportunity.
Can you tell me when the broker was hired?
I don't know that date certain. I know that it was prior to the April most recent extension meeting that we referenced earlier. So the broker has been in place for that period of time. Unfortunately, their efforts have sort of been for naught given the complete dearth of interest in the intervening 3 months.
So I'm concerned that since July up until just before April 7th, there was no broker. So I'm not sure how strong Abachi was in trying to find a buyer. that concerns me. I'm not sure what the additional 3 months is going to get you. I just don't see the effort being there. I do understand the pandemic situation has caused tremendous hardship for the restaurants, but certainly people are ramping up and starting to open up, and we're just basically hearing from you that there's nothing, and you're hoping that with the Baker's transition calendar of opening up restaurants that you're able to do something. I'm not so sure, Brian. I'm really not so sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
If
Mr.
I
Lane,
could briefly respond to that, just given new information.
go right ahead. Yes, sir.
Yes, I just sent a text message to the client and received the information that the broker was hired in November. So I would argue that there has been diligent effort on Hibachi's behalf to find a buyer for the license, that it's not a product of sitting back and waiting for someone to take it. And I would just suggest that the same rationale that encouraged the board to give the extension to tonight from April would hold true to allow the entity the opportunity to find a transferee, given that that opportunity was essentially stolen by the pandemic. So I would suggest both that Hibachi has been diligent in hiring a broker as early as November, that there have been ongoing efforts, and the same rationale that convinced the board to give us until tonight should hold true to give us the 3-month extension that would essentially replace the time lost due to the pandemic, or any lesser amount of time that the board is comfortable with.
Mr. Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the newest board member, I'm getting caught up on the history here, and I do have sympathy for your situation. I also understand where Mr. Jar is coming from. I had the same questions asking about when a broker was hired, what kind of due diligence you'd been undergoing. I'm more inclined to agree with Mrs. Donahue in giving a few more months, given that this is just an unprecedented time. But I'm just not confident that you're going to be successful, because from what I read and what I hear, restaurants are closing, they're not opening, and so it's just going to be a really tough job for you guys to accomplish. And but I'm willing.
Mr.
I
Maloney?
appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Malone, you're muted.
He has
Not
to
here.
turn his mic on.
Thank you. I was just saying, Mr. Chairman, I'm pretty confident that the license will not be conveyed in the next 90 days because the circumstances which make it difficult to do business will obtain, I'm pretty sure, for 90 days more. So if we're going to give them 90, you might as well acclimate yourself to the idea you might be giving them 180 days if the justification is the general economic situation that we're in. I don't mind doing that, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I'll give them the time. Because it is true, we are in an extraordinary situation. I think we're going to be discussing a couple of other extraordinary measures later tonight. However, the one for you, Mr. Chairman, perhaps is just that we have talked in the last couple of years about perhaps tightening up the process here. And I don't mean to say it's lacked integrity, but we've been lenient. It's probably been wise that we've been lenient, but I just want that to be on the table. I'm happy to go along with the majority on this. If you want to give them 90 days, I'm pretty confident we'll be back here in 90 days having the same conversation. But I do want to make my colleagues aware of that, stated and tighten things up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm not sure that the process has been loose. We did give 2 different establishments that I can think of, including this one, an additional extension, but that's within our prerogative. Typically, if we want to absolutely pull the license, we have to give them at least 60 days notice, 6 months notice, excuse me. And so we've done that and beyond. And you're concerned about maybe the process being loose, but aren't we just, instead of tightening it up, just making it that much worse by giving yet another extension?
That's my point. That my question to you is, aren't we doing that?
Yeah, we would be, yeah, and I don't think that's a good practice myself. Pocket licenses are something to be taken seriously and not left out there. Usually the ABCC and courts have ruled to give the establishments a reasonable time, which has been determined to be 6 months. We usually give them more than that because we give them some time before we even call them in to give them that 6-month warning. So they have additional time to begin with. So I just don't think we should leave them out there. Again, I go back to the fact that we had some good times before COVID hit, and they were unsuccessful in selling it, and that was within the 60-day period we had given them. And we're not sure the exact reasons why these sales aren't going through. It might be that the seller's unreasonably high in the price and won't come down, and they're just hoping for more time to get their price. All I know is I don't think it's fair to the public to have a pocket license out there personally. Mrs. Donahue, you had something further to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. People in the real estate business have heard of the concept of co-broke, and the seller hired a broker, but there has always been, for the premises in that location, a key broker, and he passed away. His name was Elliot Ravick, and all of the transactions that went down there, Elliot was the key moving party and worked so beautifully with other brokers. And we're sorry that we lost him, that he was lost this year, he passed away. And so this could have further bearing on their ability to get the job done.
Well, that's the landlord's representative, not the license holders.
That's right. And the landlord has, and that's correct, Mr. Chair. And the landlord has a very key interest in the rent being paid, because he's suffering too.
All right, this is a public hearing continued. I don't see anyone joining us for wishing comment. So the further questions from the board or motion to close the hearing, if that's the wish of the board.
Motion to close the hearing.
Second.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
I just want to go back before I take this vote, because I don't want to have misled anything, and ask you for the closing of the hearing. If there's an intent to continue the hearing, that motion should be made prior to any closing, because otherwise it's too late to continue the hearing. So, Mrs. Donahue, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but based on your earlier comments, do you want to make such a motion?
Please, so move.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
There's a second. All right. Anything further on that motion to continue the hearing? Mr. Maloney?
We're continuing it for how long did we say?
I thought we,
I believe it was a 90 days requested.
Okay. All right.
I don't have to vote for this. You can vote yes or no on this motion, as we can with any motion. So we have a motion to honor the request for a further extension of 90 days from tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, sounds like a 3-2 vote, and we'll poll the board. Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Lane,
aye.
Mr. Jah,
No.
and the chair votes no. So the request and the extension has been granted on a 3-2 vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and the members of the board.
Thank you. All right, we can move on to the next order of business then, which is committee assignments. We have always a few things for the members to work on, and I've taken the liberty to make a list for each member. We'll start off with this list, and if anybody has any reasons why they don't feel any of the appointments that I asked you to, or committees or functions I asked you to serve on is a good fit, you contact me afterwards. We'll move them around somehow and make sure everyone's comfortable with what they're working on. But my desire at this point is, Mr. Maloney, if you would serve on our negotiating team for the public safety group. And the manager has requested that we set up some liaisons from the board to work with some of his staff that are doing some ongoing studies of operational matters that depending on what the recommendation and action by the board at the end of the day could be major changes in the way we provide services and basically affect restructuring of some of our operations. So to that extent, end, I'd like you to join the manager staff in reviewing our dispatching and whether or not we might consider going into a regional dispatch. Also like you to continue to serve on the townwide balancing committee. And appreciate that if you'd continue there. You've done an excellent job. Mr. Jha, I'd like you to take up a lot
Yes,
of
sir.
our,
Very good.
Mr. Jha, I'd like you to take up some heavy load on our negotiating teams. I'd like you to do the clerical, the library, and the Department of Public Works. I'd also like you to join the townwide budget committee. I'm going to step aside from that. Been on there 18 out of the last 20 years. I think it's time to get some new perspective in there, and I think you've shown a significant interest in that field. So I'd like you to join that committee for the board. And also in that liaison area that I mentioned earlier, the manager has a staff reviews getting started on our ambulance service and our delivery of ambulance services. And I'd like you to be the committee's liaison on that. Mrs. Donahue, I'd like you to join us, a negotiating team on the light department. I'd also like you to join me in handling the process for selecting a replacement for our administrative assistant who is moving on to another assignment in Walpole. And we wish her the best of luck at her promotion and transfer over there. And so no, I'd like you very much to continue representing the board on Norfolk County Advisory Committee. Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lane, I'd like you to serve us by being our appointed member to the Community Preservation Committee. I'd also like you to, I know you've been serving as a moderator to the Capital Outlay Committee, but I'd like you to be the board's formal representation to that committee. And the moderator can fill your seat with a new member. Also, we have a study committee going on at the rec department having to do with the future use of our swimming pools and what actions we might take in that regard. Mr. Howard was serving on that, and my initial thoughts were he would continue to serve us even though he's not still on the board, but he thought it'd be proper that we have a member of the board serving. So if you could, I'd like you to take that position as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In the meantime, I'll handle fire negotiations, work with the manager over concerns about the situation at Norwood Hospital and how that might affect the town and what actions we might have to take or need to take, if any, and also town hall repairs. We'll start off with those assignments, and as I said earlier, if there's any need to adjust them, contact me personally and we'll move things around. But I think that would leave the board well represented in all those areas. Mr. Maloney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think on that school committee, both Mr. Howard and I served on it. We had two representatives from the board. Well, somehow I found my way onto it anyway, but I'm happy to stay on it if you want to keep the two of us there, be with Mr. Lane or not.
Absolutely, please. Don't mean to upset the apple cart on anything that's been working well. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the next order of business. Sayer Food Market 2, Inc. Business as Sayer Market, operating at 568 Providence Turnpike, can submit an application for a CV license. I think you all received information on that, and this afternoon, if you're able to check your emails, there was a actual diagram of the layout. Basically, the food's prepared at the rear of the market, and people would then bring their food up to the cashiers and pay for their food. And then if they choose to eat at the establishment, just as you walk in the door, front door to your right, 4 tables where they could sit down and enjoy the meals. And on the left side of the door, there are restrooms available. So things seem to be in order unless members have a particular question.
Motion to approve.
A second?
Second.
Josh seconds, all in favor? Opposed? Mr. Baloney?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that passes unanimously. Travis Fowley, the Recreation Department, as Superintendent, has submitted to the board's information notification from the Norwood Day Committee that they have postponed the Norwood Day in September. Unfortunately, another victim of the COVID-19 epidemic that's affecting us all. He also says that they are still working on details, but they're hoping to have at least some fireworks, some kind of celebration, maybe in October or later in the season. So that's the information to file.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Opposed, unanimous. Mr. Baloney, Mrs. Donahue, Mr. Lane.
Yes.
Mr. Hajar. Yeah,
Aye.
motion's carried. The next business is the Conservation Commission, where we have two resignations. We have Cheryl Doyle submitting her immediate resignation from the Conservation Commission, and Joseph DiMaria also submitting his resignation effective immediately. I noticed that those resignations were not submitted to the general manager who makes the appointment, subject to our approval, nor to the town clerk. So I accept the motion to forward those to those two individuals.
So moved.
Mr.
On the
Lane,
motion.
Mr. Maloney on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two things. One is I think we probably ought to send letters of appreciation to the two, to Ms. Doyle and Mr. DiMaria combined. They've served quite a number of years on the Conservation Commission and done good work. And then, of course, put the word out there to the public that we're looking for possibly looking for two more Conservation Commission members. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's, I probably should have said that, but I guess in back of my mind, that was a given that we would send that letter along with forwarding the letter, send the letters of thank you to those members for their service. Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure how many years Mrs. Doyle was on there, but Mr. Joe DiMaria was on the Conservation Commission for 40 years. That is a huge amount of service to the town. And thank you both very, very much. We've come a long way. And I'm sorry that you're not, that you're retiring. Has Mrs. Kennefic, have you received any application? Because I have good news. Liza Riolo said that she is going to submit an application to the town for prior to there was a vacancy prior to the two resignations. So actually is that right?
Mrs. Donahue?
Right,
If-
we need 3 people. We
Mrs.
need
Donahue?
3 people. Mhm.
Mrs. Donahue, if you know anyone who's interested and we receive them at the Selectmen's office, we'll forward them. But if you're speaking to them directly, they could send them directly to the general manager since it's his appointment, subject to our approval. But they start with the general manager.
Thanks. I said that they had to fill out the application that's on the computer for being interested in service to the town, and then make it known that the Conservation Commission that they're interested in. So you want them sent right to the general manager then?
That way we don't make sure they don't get overlooked, yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Like I said, if we receive them, we'll make sure we forward them, but it would be best if they go direct.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hajar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank Cheryl and Joe DiMaria for their longtime service. They certainly made Norwood proud of the progress that we made over the years. I'm deeply concerned about the reasons why they had to submit or felt the need to submit their resignation, but I understand it. I hope going forward we can have a better discussion about what we're trying to do organizationally. I know that's going to be up in an upcoming agenda, but I really want to publicly thank the both of them for their long-time service, and the fact that they felt that the need to leave the board. That's their decision, and I wish them luck in whatever they do, whether it's for the town or not. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Anything else? Seeing none, I'll put it to a vote. The vote is to accept the resignations, forward them to the general manager and the town clerk, and to send letters of thank you for their many years of dedicated service to the town. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Maloney, Mrs. Donahue, Mr. Lane,
Aye.
Mr. Ja,
Aye.
chair votes yes, that's unanimous. Next item on our agenda is Cigar Reese, Superintendent and Director of the Board of Health. She submitted a request to place a banner on the poles on Washington Street between Vernon and Day Streets on between September 14th and September 28th to advertise household hazardous waste recycling day, which will be held on September 26th.
So
Motion
moved.
approved.
Moved and second, nothing further. All in favor? Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Lane,
Aye.
Mr. Ja,
Aye.
chair votes aye, that's unanimous. The next item is local 1451 memorandum of agreement for the library unit and the clerical unit. We took those matters up in executive session at our last meeting. We approved them, and we just should do that formally now since there was action taken. The negotiation part of it's over in public. So I'd accept the motion to approve those two agreements. Mr. Ja,
So
So
moved.
moved.
made and seconded. Anything on the motion? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Lane,
Aye.
Mr. Ja,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye, so the motion passes unanimously. Next item is Mr. Mizuko, our general manager again, submitting a request to the board to transfer a contribution to the rate stabilization fund. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As has happened, sometimes the light department has credits available and is able to transfer the money in your capacity as light commissioners. We last did this about 6 years ago, and we are looking to build up our rate stabilization fund or our rate shock fund as we did receive a credit downgrade about a year or two ago. So this is an opportunity to be able to put some of our credit or excess into the rate stabilization fund, and it's a sign of a good year, especially going into the year that we look like we're going to have, given how 2020 is unfolded so far.
Yes, Mr. Maloney.
Just a note, I'm in favor of this. I note that the contribution will bring the total in the rate stabilization account to over 4.6 million. So it's about a 12% increase over the previous number. I think it's a great idea. Make it a lot easier for us to smooth things out as we go forward. So I'm in favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hajar?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Maloney. It's a good number. What is our goal with that fund? Not for use, but what's the amount that we're trying to build to that we feel comfortable with?
So realistically, we would probably want it to be around 4 or 5 times the amount it currently is. If you think about it, if we lost a major power supplier and then we had a 20 or 30% spike in rates that lasted for 6 months or a year, if our monthly purchase power is around $4 million and it goes up to 6, we're going to want to mitigate that over a year or two. So we're well below where we should be. And as a reminder, as I saw someone shaking their head, we received a credit downgrade last year because of the money we have, the lack of money we have in the fund balance. Light departments run differently as a utility than the general town does. So we're substantially undercapitalized in the total funds we're holding on the light department. So we could get that funded between $15 and $20 million. We could actually make a difference. To put it in perspective, it's just about less than a month's power bill for the town. So we would be able to mitigate a substantial rate impact for maybe 2 months, and that's it. So if we're actually looking at something that would cause a rate increase to go up substantially, our ability to mitigate that now is effectively nil. And I'll just give 2 quick examples of that. One would be we lose a major power supplier and our costs spike as a result of that. It would be a major business in town that's down for an extended period of time. So we have 2 entities that their annual electric bill exceeds $1.5 million. One of them is Norwood Hospital, which is currently down. Now we're hoping by the time they get up, we can mitigate that without a rate increase. But if we were to lose one of those entities for a year, we would be looking at a 5 to 10% rate increase for everyone in town at a minimum. That would cause other businesses to certainly close their doors. So the dollar amount, this is a good addition, as Mr. Maloney put. It's nowhere near it needs to be. In the light department, which gets its credit rated separately, actually will drag down the town's credit rating if we don't approve it. And we do have a $100 million project coming up in the near future with the middle school.
All right, just, I'm sure you can all see if Mr. Collins from the Light Department has joined, if anyone had a particular question of Mr. Collins. All right, any other comments? Mr. Hajar?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up. Is it advantageous at all for us to try to build on that number more than annually? I mean, we do get great reports from the Light Department each month about how they're doing, which is great. And like you said, Mr. Chairman, it was really, or Mr. Mizuko, this past year was a really good year. And if things continue on that avenue, are we better to show more progressive payments rather than just waiting for one big lump sum at the end? Might give the creditors some good information that we're constantly looking at how to make improvements to that fund without waiting for the annual.
No, so you have to wait until the end of the year to see how your books are going to balance for the year to know whether or not you have anything available to transfer. So we may look at it in January and say, hey, we think we can do this. Then all of a sudden we're wrong. And then we're rushing to find the money. So it's always an end of the year transfer. In terms of building it up, our plan is, I mean, first of all, any opportunity you have to put money in the fund and not take it out is fantastic. This happened to be a year where we're able to do that. We are looking at, there's the large note that comes off in the Light Department in 2 or 3 years. We have sort of a 5-year schedule of what's going to happen when that comes off. And there'll be a series of rate relief each year to provide rate relief to residents or a lack of an increase. And the first year will be a heavy induction into the fund, and then that amount will go down over time. So at the end of that 5-year period, which starts in around 2 to 3 years, assuming we have no major crises, assuming, that's a big assumption nowadays, that fund at the end of that period will be very well capitalized, will be among the top light departments in the state. We will have plenty of money in there if we get there.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Maloney.
Yeah, just one other thing, actually, Mr. Mizuko, you bring up a good point on what is or Mr. Chairman, you might know, what are the conditions under which we can take money out of the rate stabilization account if necessary? It's the commissioners who do it, right?
It's really a rate shock fund. We call it rate stabilization, but it's really rate shock to absorb any shocks to the rate. So it would have to be something that caused our rates to substantially face a shock, loss of a major power supplier, loss of a major commercial customer, something along those lines.
But what I mean is the logistics of it. If we decide we want to do it, stabilization accounts have certain provisions or certain rules under which they can be manipulated. What is the case here?
This is not a stabilization fund like a town meeting, general government. We use that same term, but it has different meaning, different purpose under the Light Department's accounting and the section of the Mass General Laws. Basically, it would take a vote of us as light commissioners to make that happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything further? How about a motion?
You have one?
Have one already?
Yes, I believe so.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Mizuko. Thank you all. Cemetery deeds for review and approval by signature by the board.
Motion to sign.
Motion to sign?
All in favor? Opposed? Mr.
Aye.
Mr. Maloney? Mrs. Donahue? Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. Next item is from Dawn Fitzgerald of 105 Westover Parkway. She submitted an application to hold a rally supporting Norwood Police Day on the town common for Saturday, July 25th, 2020, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Motion to approve.
Second?
On the motion, we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that also passes unanimously. Brings us to Selectmen's meeting. We have several that we're able to get caught up with. I hope you had a long weekend of enjoyable reading. Minutes of the board from December 17th, 2019, January 7th, 14th, 21, and 28th, February 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th, and March 3rd, 20th, and 24th of 2020. Any comments, additions, deletions? Otherwise, a motion to approve all would be in order.
So moved.
A second? All in favor, Mr. Lane, thank you. All in favor, Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Donahue?
Abstain.
Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So that's 4 with 1 abstention. 4 in favor, 1 abstention. So the next item here under memoranda is from our Recreation Superintendent again, Travis Farley. He submitted his monthly report of activities. If there's no particular questions you think Mr. Mizuko can answer, then accept the motion to accept the report.
Motion to accept
Motion
and
to
file.
file.
All in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Unanimous. Mr. Lane? Mr.
Aye.
Tony? Mr. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Hajar?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Next is the manager's additional update, Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go mask free for just a second here so I can explain to the board and the watching public 2 items before the board. One is the ratification of the state of emergency declared as a result of Sunday's substantial rainfall. So I'd ask the board first to approve the emergency ratification of the declaration of an emergency.
So move.
Second? Anything on that motion? All in favor? Mr. Lang?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second item is we are requesting the board approve a grant program we just sent to you. We're titling this the Flood Damage Remediation Grant Program. We have identified 2 funding sources, and the appropriate authority is confirmed by town council to go ahead and expend those 2 sources to offer up to a $5,000 grant per homeowner. We have a total of about $175,000 available to homeowners with demonstrated damage expenses greater than or equal to the amount requested. This would be an income-based program, so we would start with folks at 80% or less of the area median income, and then the second tier would be folks within 81 to 150%. It's the quickest thing we can do to provide some immediate assistance to this number of residents who are facing substantial damages to their homes. We are hopeful with our declaration of a state of emergency, and I'll talk about that in a few moments as well and what we're doing there, that hopefully state and federal funds will come as well. Hopefully a state declaration will come as well that will charge some of these costs of their insurance. But we're looking to get what resources we have and trying to be creative to the residents who need them as the most as quickly as possible. The board has been emailed the program. It's based on our small grant program. Town council has approved this. We would like to begin accepting applications as soon as July 2nd if the board so approves the program. I'll pause there for a moment and we'll talk in general about the challenges we're facing and steps from here.
Questions, comments? Mr. Baloney?
Just, Mr. Mizuko, just reviewing the guidelines now, we're looking at household income that is at 80% or below of average annual median income in Norfolk County. We're looking at properties, of course, that are in Norwood and owned by people in Norwood. Is that correct? So they're owner occupied?
Correct. And the income, just to talk for a moment about the income requirements, we'll start first with what we're calling tier 1, which is people at that 80% or below. If we're able to help folks in that category and we have additional funding, then we will go towards tier 2. If we had funding left after that, which I don't think will be the case, but I could always be wrong, we would then look at whether we would not have that restriction. But I think even if we get through tier 1 into tier 2 income levels, we would probably quickly run out of funds. But we want to get what help we can out there.
Mr. Donahue?
Is Mr. Maloney done?
Yes.
All set.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mizuko, Mr. Manager, you are very astutely aware of a particular case here on Dean Street in South Norwood. The damage was caused by the town sewerage overflowing the property. Can you please help us with a little explanation about how this all works?
So the main challenge in a storm is actually the stormwater system. So we often confuse sewer and stormwater, and we think they're the same thing. So we see the manhole in the street and we think, oh, the sewer system and the sewer's overflowed. It's a completely separate system that treats our sewage. That's a locked system versus the drains you see, which handles all of our stormwater. There is no system in the world that could handle the rain flow that we saw on Sunday. So it's not that storm drains, the actual drain can get clogged and it causes the water to sheet over, but there is no system in the world that can handle that much water at once. So what happens is basically the pipe gets full and the water has nowhere to go, so the water tends to rise up.
The
Occasionally,
drain pipe gets full? The drain,
correct. It does. The storm drain gets full. There's simply more, the capacity simply can't handle it. And again, with 4 inches of rain in an hour and a half, there's no storm water system in the world that can handle that. We're particularly blessed that the water table was low at the time that this happened. The ponds were low at the time this happened, and the rivers were low. Had they been high, we would be having a very different discussion right now about the challenges we're facing. So there's almost nothing that can be done to completely ameliorate a problem like this, because that much rain in that short of a time, no system in the world that you could design at any reasonable cost would ever actually divert that system. So that causes rain, it causes water to pool in people's basements. And obviously as the water rises and if it goes into your yard, it pools into there, but it has nowhere to go down. It may go through your yard and transfer down into somebody else's yard. We saw it all throughout town, uptown, downtown, just about anywhere. Norwood's most of Norwood is not in a flood zone, but with that much water in that short of a period of time, we haven't seen. The last time we saw that amount of rainfall was, we believe, the storm in '98, and this was actually more intense than that, which is why we saw flooding in areas we never saw before. We saw storm drains overflow that we've never had a problem with before. I know the Heritage Baptist Church on Washington Street here had about 4 feet of water in it. A number of homes did. So it was quite a significant amount of rainfall in a short period of time, but it's just, there's no system that can ultimately fix that. We always make some changes every year to stormwater. We've looked at a stormwater utility or user fee that would give us more funding available for stormwater projects. But if you were to try to make sure it never happened again, it would probably be a $10 billion project or something like that. It's just, there's no system in the world that can handle that amount of rainfall in that short of period of time.
so a lot of the water that was coming out of the sewer was actually just ground rainwater.
Correct. It's rarely coming out of the sewer. It's the storm drains that have just filled up. It's still not clean water. I mean, it's water that has hit the ground and run along the ground. I mean, it's runoff. It's not, I wouldn't drink the runoff, of course, but it's rarely, if ever, actual raw sewage. That's why when you have a backup of a sewer into a home, that's a problem with the sewage system. One of the things folks often ask us is, can you open up the sewer drains to let water flow? That's the worst thing in the world you can do, because if you don't have a backflow preventer, all that extra water goes in the sewer system and it kicks it back into the home. So you keep the sewer system completely separate, and we don't like to open it up unless there was maybe a hole draining here or there that we knew about.
Because we declared a state of emergency, would that help the homeowners with their insurance companies?
We would certainly back them up in telling their insurance companies that. Usually it needs to be a state or federal declaration, which we're working on. But by all means, call the office and get a copy of the declaration after the board signs it. And we will, if that works for people, we hope it does. The reason we're pursuing state and federal efforts as well is to hopefully get homeowners as much as they can. Our dollar amount is limited. We know we're not going to be able to help a lot of people with it, but we will be able to help some people, perhaps the neediest among us. And then the more resources we can find for the storm as well as the hospital, which is a separate issue, we want to go for. We're hopeful that that state declaration, if it does come from Norfolk County, would allow folks to have their insurance cover some of their losses as well.
What would be the procedure for a person trying to get some money from the town? What do you do?
So if the board approves the grant program, it'll be available on our website July 2nd. They would fill out the form. They need to send it in with some tax information. And
There's got to be another way, because a lot of old timers don't have computers.
yeah, if they don't have a computer, they can contact the senior center, and Carrie, our senior director, will specifically be reaching out to seniors, and they can discuss with her ways to get it. That being said, to your point, Mrs. Donahue, if there's anyone out there who doesn't use social media or doesn't have a computer, now is the time to do it. They are going to continually find themselves locked out of emergency response, emergency resources, and other resources that the town has. I know there's some folks who struggle with that. There's some economic barriers for some people, but now is the time to try to make that change in your life and find assistance for that, because it's really the only way we can communicate with folks. But we will make special outreach efforts to senior citizens through the senior center.
Through the senior center, we can't just say get a computer, because some people over 60 or 70, 80 years old aren't going to get a computer. it's our duty to be able to let them contact us.
Absolutely.
Somehow.
I encourage them to follow the lead of John Carroll, who jumps on Zoom meetings with the MWRA at 92. So the senior center will be more than willing to help you with that.
Person.
Mr. Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say, this is a great program. I'm really proud that we're able to do this. And in reading the document, anyone that's watching at home, please, take pictures, document receipts, all of those things. That's really important to be able to prove the damages. So just sending that message out there to anyone that might be watching.
The chairman would like me to discuss what it covers. So just I can go into a little bit more detail on the program. The funds will be used to reimburse residents of owner-occupied residences for flood damage cleanup, building repair, mold remediation, electrical and plumbing system repairs, heating systems repairs or replacement if the damage is related to the flooding, and then appliance replacement if it's related to the flooding. And we might be able to tie in light department energy efficiency money to make that appliance replacement go faster. We are aware of people who are concerned that they've lost a heating system, lost their washer and dryer. So everyone's needs are going to be different. It's not for replacing personal electronics, damage outside the home, or furniture and fixings, furnishings and furniture, carpets and things like that. It really is focused on the habitability of the building and the key systems of the building, of the home in this case, which is how we're able to use local funds to be able to assist people. So it's really fixing the core, but cleanup is included, mold remediation, and fixing any damage to your home that threatens the viability or the habitability of the home.
Any other questions? Mr. Hajar?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also just want to chime in and say that I'm happy to support this program in these times. I mean, normally you wouldn't want to set precedent on this, but not only are we trying to get out of a pandemic, we have a flood that we usually don't get in long periods of time, but we got a double whammy here. So anything that we can do, I'm grateful that the town of Norwood has such funds available that we can disperse them in $5,000 amounts or less to help as many people as possible. So I think it's great. So if there are elderly at the home and they have loved ones nearby that can help them, that's great. Or the senior center, there's lots of ways that they can do this. But I'm glad the word's going to go out very shortly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Tony, for putting it together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? I think we need a motion then. It sounds like there's a lot of support. Motion to support and endorse the program.
So moved.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Mr. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Elaine?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that's unanimously supported. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank
Do you have anything additional?
A couple of things, if the board would indulge me for just a moment. I do appreciate the board's willingness to move quickly on programs like this. It's rare that government is able to move this quickly to try to get assistance to people, and the board's willingness to be flexible and meet and approve projects like this and programs like this quickly it has a direct impact on our residents. So we're greatly appreciative of that. Sunday, just to talk a little bit about what happened in brief and then where we are with the hospital. As the board knows, we experienced an immense amount of rainfall in a short period of time, overloading storm drains throughout the community. We had a number of flooding issues throughout town, the worst of which was at the hospital. As many residents of the community and the board certainly know, their mechanical and electrical operations, their pharmacy are on their ground level. That entire area was flooded. The hospital is temporarily closed. This is a concern for us for a number of reasons. First of all, the hospital has close to 1,400 employees. The hospital is a large tax, water, and sewer payer. And the hospital also provides service not just to our 30,000 residents and visitors to the town, but a catchment area that exceeds 250,000 people. It's the emergency response stop for a dozen ambulance services, including our own. So while the hospital is temporarily closed and down, it is an increase in the lag time for emergency transports. We've spoken to the hospital a number of times between yesterday and today, and we continue to do so. The hospital will be down for several weeks. They're working to assess their long-term damage and see how quickly they can get back up and running. We want them to assist them in getting up and running as soon as possible. It will take time. It will be challenging. I spoke earlier today I know Mr. Cooper spoke with our legislative delegation, I spoke with the lieutenant governor and a staffer from the governor's office and left a message for Congressman Lynch, and we've also reached out to his staff. We are asking for whatever federal and state resources can be brought to bear, including a declaration of an emergency, so that we can help the hospital get up and running as quickly as possible. We know that there may be some employment challenges there. I've already spoken to the Director of Career Services, staff at the hospital, and the workforce region. And working with them, we're going to be providing whatever wraparound services we can to any employees who are at the hospital who are affected by this. It's going to be a challenge. We'll get on the other side of it and we'll overcome it. I think this year has shown us if we're nothing but resilient in Norwood. But it was a rough storm. All the roads in town are open. Power has been restored. Our challenge now is getting assistance to residents that need it and working with the hospital to see how quickly we can get them back up and running. We had a number of power outages as a result of the storm on Sunday. I have details I can send along to the board. They have since been restored.
Mrs. Donahue, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mizuko, is it true that it costs the hospital $500,000 a day to be shut?
I would bet that their number actually exceeds that as an entity. Hospitals are relatively large entities, so I can't comment specifically on what their dollar loss is, but I would say it well exceeds that amount.
So thank you. Talking to people who work there, everyone is very, very concerned, and this is a very serious matter. And thank you for all you've done so far to help out. You've been very, very diligent there trying to help out. Thank you.
My pleasure. We're here to serve the community, and Norwood Hospital has been our hospital for 100 years, and we're going to do everything to support the hospital that we can do.
Thank you.
Anything further? Any questions? Mr. Maloney?
Just a general point, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Mizuko about how admirably I think our folks have performed in all departments throughout this past weekend. This has been a pretty rugged year so far, for a number of reasons. And Sunday's flood was just sort of the cherry on the ice cream, I guess, the cherry on the sundae for the time being. But anyway, I think everyone, DPW, Light Department, Public Safety, if there are other people we ought to thank, Mr. Mizuko, please do for us, because they're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate
You
that.
certainly speak for the whole board, I'm sure. Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Anything further? Nothing else, Mr. Mizuko?
No, I'll stop here. I've spoken enough.
All right, thank you. So that brings us to the end of our appointed agenda. Is there any other new business? Seeing none, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
Are we having selectmen's agendas?
Mr. Maloney?
Well, just one thing, Mr. Chairman, we've had one of the most difficult months in the history of our nation, June of 2020. It's over as of 3 hours and 45 minutes from now. And we just want to wish everybody out there a happy 4th of July. It'll get better from here. Happy birthday, United States, the greatest country on earth. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you forgot the selectmen's agendas.
I asked any new business. That's how we refer to it these days.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
Ahead if you have something.
I'll catch on. So during the storm on Sunday, I have to tell you very fast, townspeople of Norwood, what the town of Norwood is about. On Lenox Street at about 5:30, 6 o'clock, there was a rock that was 12 inches in diameter on the road. And some cars went around it. A couple of cars hit the side of it. This young woman hit the whole thing and started to drag her car down. So 3 young men who were parked waiting for the rain to subside got out of their car. They emptied out the trunk of their car and they took the jack out of the trunk and tried to jack up the woman's car. And they were trying and then another truck stopped. An older man got out. He showed them how to use the jack. They jacked up the car, lifted up the car, and freed the car. So this is the type of thing, the type of town that we have. And this is the type of thing that was going on during that storm. The police were out, the public works were out, the light department was out, the fire department was out. One of the most saddest things when I saw the Walpole ambulance go by trying to get to the hospital during the height of the storm. So as Mr. Maloney, Selectman Maloney said, we've been through an awful lot lately, but we are Norwood and we are Americans. And as Mr. Maloney said, this is our country. We need to support it the most now. So happy 4th of July.
Thank you. Mr. Hajar?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been said, but I want to echo it. 2020 has been a really tough year in many ways. It's probably a year we're going to want to forget when it's over. But we still got 6 more months to deal with whatever comes our way. But Norwood truly is a wonderful town. And I think it was proven that even though we're under tremendous stress because of the pandemic, the water that came down and the number of people, employees and volunteers that just jumped to do whatever they could do to help homeowners, residents, businesses in the hospital, it says a lot for this town. So I also want to thank every single one of them that did what they could. It's very much appreciated. It's noted. You do great things in this town. Appreciate. And also, I also want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July. Now more than ever, we need to be able to celebrate these things, and so everyone enjoy, including my colleagues, have a wonderful 4th of July weekend.
Thank you. Just want to remind the public, maybe most people are aware, but some may not have got the word yet, that unfortunately, as well as we're going to try to celebrate this important day, things like public gatherings such as our parade have been canceled. So there will be no 4th of July celebrations in that respect. Mr. Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what everyone else has said, and I agree wholeheartedly. I just would like to say, be safe, be well, check in on your neighbors, and enjoy the 4th of July. And like Mr. Maloney said, June is almost over, and I think that's a good thing.
For sure. Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot one thing that I wanted to ask the board. We have the 150th celebration coming up, and we need to get busy on that. So I'd like to ask the board if we could work on that. But could we please ask Mr. Cooper, or however we do it formally, Mr. Chair, we have a reservation for the Sheraton 4 Points for the annual day of the anniversary, and we don't want to lose that. We're getting close to that date. So at a meeting that we had at the police and fire station, we talked about a lot of different places, and it would seem that that would be the best place to have it. So should we take action on that? Ask Mr. Cooper tonight to just reserve that and then go ahead with the new planning for the rest of the event? Or should we postpone it for 2 weeks?
I believe he's already been asked, and we'll check with him to see if he's acted on that or not. I believe Mr. Maloney has spoken to him, and I mentioned it one day too. So we'll make double certain that that reservation or that deposit has been made, but it's actually in the works. Mr. Maloney, I don't know if you have anything more to say. The initial meeting we had at the police fire station, you pretty much ran that. Not sure how we're going to break it down going forward, but I don't know if you have any kind of update at all. I know it's been tough with this COVID.
No, we're just trying to work on some branding for the celebration as well. We'd like to have another big meeting, but we're a little bit limited by COVID-related restrictions. Probably sometime in July, sometime this coming month, and we'll have to do something. And we might even actually, I suppose we could do a go-to meeting thing like this. So, Mr. Cooper is working in the February 23rd, 2022 reservation at the Sheraton.
Thank you. We could also have a meeting outside someplace, at Hodge Pool or something, in the shade.
All right, well, let's wait through July. We'll leave that part up to Mr. Maloney. If things continue so that we just cannot have that type of meeting, we'll regroup and decide, because time is not, at this point, starting to get short. These kind of celebrations take some good planning. We don't want it to go too much longer before the town really gets behind this movement. All right, so we'll leave it that way for this evening. And anything further?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, favor, opposed, unanimous, Mr. Donahue? Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Maloney, aye. Mr. Najjar?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
And before I say aye and turn off, this is my third computer this evening. I'm not sure what's going on. We know
It's a
I'm
hat
not
trick.
the tech guy, but it wasn't me. I wasn't near the machines. So my apologies to my colleagues as well as to the public who are trying to follow our meeting. And thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We stand adjourned.